of that one encounter and what it did. If it would have just stayed there and we would have ran off, that would have been one thing. But chasing us, and either it was that its mate was by my car or it was by my car. That was enough to scare me, because I just kind of have a feeling if we wouldn't have took off running like we did, I don't even know if I'd be talking to you right now.
Yeah, that is terrifying.
So what got you into writing books? I mean, here you are, you play music, you're an artist, and it seems like you're writing some good books. What, on Bigfoot on the East Coast and West Coast?
Bigfoot in Pennsylvania, Bigfoot West Coast Wildman, and I've written 2 books on a local area that I'm very interested in that has a super high concentration of paranormal activity in one area. I'm very interested in that phenomenon. But I had written a piece for the Weird USA books on a local event. They called it the Hex Murder. It took place in 1928. It was a local, he wasn't a witch. He was what we call here a powwow doctor. It's basically a faith healer. And he was murdered. And I wrote that story. And the editors of the Weird USA book asked me to take pictures for that story and another story, Toad Road, which is actually where that area I was discussing before that I've written 2 books about now. And so I took the photos, and then I asked him, I said, you should really let me kind of check what you write about the Toad Road, because there's a lot of nonsense out there that's just, it doesn't jive with local history. It's just not true, some of these stories on the internet. And they went ahead and printed this kind of outrageous story that looks like it came right off the internet and put my photos next to it. So at that point I kind of made up my mind. Well, one day I'm gonna write the true story of this place, and it started out as an article, and then that became my first book, which is called Beyond the Seventh Gate. And I had so much fun putting the book together that I decided to just keep writing books. So I'm on book number 4 now.
Oh, wow. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit more about that first book, and then we can get into the Bigfoot books, and then we'll even pump you what the number 4 is going to be about.
Sure. So the first book was, like I said, it was called Beyond the Seventh Gate. And there was this legend in the local area about the 7 gates of hell, supposedly. And it was tied to different places, but post-internet, like once the internet came around, they started tying it to this area called Toad Road. And they said there was an insane asylum out there that burnt down, and all the victims died, and those that didn't die in the fire, the local townspeople were afraid of them and killed them in the woods, and all the paranormal stuff that happens out there is the ghosts of these insane asylum victims. It's a good story for a B movie, but it's absolutely not true. There was never an insane asylum out there. There's never been an insane asylum in York County, Pennsylvania, ever. The patients with mental illness have gone to the almshouse before they built York Hospital, and once they built York Hospital, there's been a dedicated area in York Hospital for that. So there's never been a standalone insane asylum anywhere. I pointed this out to people, the people who I believe probably just came up with this fiction, and they shifted and said, oh, it was the mad doctor with a mansion that burnt down, and he kept insane asylum patients in his mansion, which again wasn't true. But unfortunately, there was a doctor who lived on the road, and he became, in some of these local ghost story books, this mad doctor. Now, the thing is, he was not a mad doctor. He didn't even work with the mentally ill. He was a kind of a cardiologist, and he served in both world wars, and he did a lot of work locally for the poor and aged, charity work and so forth. So he was a good guy, and it was a shame that he got tied to this sort of nonsense legend. So I kind of cleared his name, I hope, in my first book. And but the thing is that there is paranormal activity associated with this area. There's a lot of weird stuff that goes on there. But as I looked at it, it didn't really jive with ghosts of insane asylum victims at all. What it sounded like was cryptids. What people were reporting most often was screams from the woods, or being paced out of the woods, being followed, weird eye shine in the woods, and different things that really sounded like cryptid activity. And then I found old newspaper reports from 1973, which reported a fellow said he was attacked by what he called a hairy monster right in the area of Toad Road. And that sort of confirmed it for me that I was looking at cryptid activity in the area. So that's my first book is basically mostly about that.
Now, like in your area, what can you describe what the Bigfoot looks like there? Because I know all over the country there's different descriptions of a Bigfoot. Here, they're like 8 to 10 feet tall, around 800 pounds, usually kind of brownish black, long fur, and kind of humanoid, ape-looking faces.
Mm-hmm. Well, they say there's different types of Bigfoot, and I'm not 100% sure how firmly I subscribe to that. There's these different types. I'm not sure if they're different species or if these things just look differently or exactly what the case is. But there are different. People do report different things. They report kind of one that's more of a caveman-looking thing, one that's the patty type, like you described, the more ape-like but upright. Some report almost a baboon-like face on some, with a bit of a muzzle, and I think that's it. And then of course there's what we call the little people, the real short ones, which we have around here too, the 4 to 5 feet tall ones. But Pennsylvania is interesting because we get a mix of all of the above. We get a crazy amount of reports. We get everything from the patty type to the people say they saw the caveman type to the baboon type. So we get a good mix here. And in the area I specialize in, we've had mostly the patty type, and we get reports of white ones a lot as well.
Wow, I haven't heard too many about the white colored haired ones, around in the country. That's kind of interesting too.
Yeah. And more lately, it seems. It seemed like it was something, fairly rare, and then you'd hear one or two pop up here and there. But lately, I've been collecting a lot of reports of white and gray is what people are seeing. So, I don't know if they're all seeing the same one or if there's a bunch of them that are light in color in the area.
Yeah, well, Karen Banks just kind of mentioned, I think the area has a lot to do with maybe the way they look with their hair color and stuff like that. All I can say is, how about like any type of proof, like getting like footprints or hair or scat or anything like that?
I've found footprints. None of them have really been castable yet. I'll call them maybe footprints. I think they were footprints, but I think an expert would, probably say it's, couldn't be defined as that. But the situations in which I found them were, to me, led me to believe that they were footprints. I know people who have cast footprints, and the really interesting thing is we get every now and then 3-toed tracks here, which is very, very bizarre. But I've seen the cast. I've held the cast of the 3-toed tracks, and they're very interesting, huge 3-toed prints, and it might be that their 5 toes kind of forged together. It's something it's called syndactyly. It's a birth defect. And when you look at the cast, it looks like that could be the case. Like their toes kind of forged together. You can almost see them where they might be separated if the toes had separated. But that's just a guess on my part. But they're very interesting, very weird, the 3-toed tracks.
Well, are you familiar with Ron Moorhead? He has captured a lot of sounds of Bigfoot.
Yeah, I've heard the Sierra sounds, and Ron actually gave me permission to use some of them on one of my albums I did. Very, very nice man. Oh, yeah, he's been on my show twice, and I think he's coming on one of my host shows here coming up in the next couple of weeks. Yeah, I kind of, we played a whole bunch of different sounds when he was on my show, and I'll tell you, it almost sounds like they have a language going. Yeah, it certainly sounds like it, and he's got that cryptolinguist that works with them who says, there is a language going on there. I've captured something like that. I'm not sure if it's the same thing or not, but I left recorders out in one of the areas that we do research in and captured some kind of, I'll just call it unknown language. It sounds like language, but it's not any language I recognize.
Well, that's one thing that intrigues me. I've had also a couple hunters on here that, are very well known, in the Bigfoot community. And they said they also can mimic sounds. The one guy claims that when he was in his tent with Ron Moorhead, that they were miles. We're talking 15, 20 miles from any road. And, he was swearing that they heard a trunk slam or a car door type sound slam and some weird noises. It kind of, made it sound like it was coming from cars and weird things. And that was rather interesting in a few cases where they said they had strange orbs appear.
Yeah, no, I've seen strange lights. I don't know if they would be considered orbs or not. They moved around a little bit, but they didn't. I've seen kind of will-o'-the-wisp lights when I was real young, and these didn't look like those. These were very, very strange. When I first saw them, a friend had told me about them. He said, I see these lights all the time in this area. And I went up and I finally saw them one night, and I thought, well, those are man-made. They look like LED lights or something. I don't know what that is out in the woods there, but it looks man-made. It didn't look like eye shine. In other words, it didn't look like the reflected light off of the tapetum, the sedum of an animal. And we're looking at them, and they started moving, and they started changing colors. And I'm like, well, okay, that's weird, but maybe there's some kind of battery-powered Christmas lights or something out there. I wasn't ready to sign off on it being anything other than something man-made until my buddy who was with me had a green laser pointer with him, a very powerful, I think it was 10-mile rated or something, green laser pointer. And I said, hey, just out of curiosity, see what happens when you hit one of those lights with the laser pointer. So he shined this green laser pointer at him, and he hit one. It took him a while to get it trained in right on the light. And when he did, and we repeated this probably a dozen times, and every time with the same result, they would turn red and go out. So he'd hit them with the laser pointer. They would turn red and then just not blink out. They kind of aperture out every single time. And that's when I said, well, okay, I don't know any man-made light that does that. That's really, really weird. So we've seen those out there. There's definitely some weird stuff that goes along with it. Very, very weird stuff that goes along with Bigfoot sightings, which has me convinced that they're not normal animals. There's something else going on with these things.
Well, that's what, again, people can say they don't exist. I never believed in Bigfoot at all to my encounter. And once you ran across one, it's something you'll never forget. I mean, like I said, I don't think at least what we ran into were the friendly type. I don't know if there are ones that are friendly, or maybe, I guess, I've had a lady on my show that lived way out in a forest in a cabin. And she said that when she first moved in there, that at night she would hear, Bigfoot type sounds, and then all of a sudden her cabin rocks would be throwing against it, the roof, the sides. She even said that a couple times they were running on her roof, and it scared her. And she had a garden, and she claimed that they would go in and rip her garden apart, for food. So she started putting a little care package together and leaving it for them. And over a long period of time, they started, not doing the rock throwing anymore, or I guess harassing her. And they started taking the care packages. And then at one point, she said that they would start leaving little trinkets back to her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've talked to several people who have had this sort of gifting exchange. Did she see creatures associated with this?
Oh yeah, she did. She would be working in her garden, and she had a garage or a shed, maybe I think 50 feet away, 75 feet away from her cabin. And she would see him there on the other side of the fence, looking at her occasionally. And just, staring at her. So, again, I'm not doubting what she said, because the way she described what the creatures looked like, it matched what I saw.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The thing is about things like wall slaps and stone throws and the sound of something walking on your roof.